Okay, hello everybody. Well, I'm sure this is the review you guys have all been waiting for. When you start up a review channel, there's only one real review that matters. You do all these reviews about, pencils and headphones and, different things. But at the end of the day, you start to realize that none of these things really matter that much. They're just like little objects. It's really not that big of a deal. So then you sit and think, what's the only thing you can review of any real significance? And, well, I decided to finally review the universe. Now, I'm not going to have enough time to go over all of it in this video because it would be over you know, a certain amount of hours to do that. That's debatable on whether it would be like two or, infinite amount of time. But So what I'm going to do instead is just sort of highlight a few interesting facts and stuff that you hear about. And we'll see if we can get anything going with that. Now, let's see, I wrote down some interesting facts here. Now, of course, the most obvious thing to start off with is the idea that we are people, you know, on a ball, on a round ball, flying through space. So that's what's important to understand. We're people on like a circular, or it could be a flat, like pancake style. The surface is irrelevant. It could be like a flat surface, or it could be a circular ball, but we're just like flying through space. We're just basically people on this ball or flat surface going through infinite space. Now, why is that important to know? The reason it's important to know is when you're having trouble in your life. Because no matter what situation you're in, once you realize that you're actually just a person floating on a ball through infinite space, it kind of makes any little issue you're dealing with sort of silly. Unless it's a serious issue, then that doesn't even work. If it's a serious issue, you don't even want someone telling you you're just a person floating on a ball through infinite space, because that'll just piss you off, right? You're dealing with something serious, and here's someone trying to tell you, "Oh man, just relax. We're just here floating through infinite space." That doesn't really help you. In fact, you might even want to you know, hurt that person, but you don't because you practice nonviolence. That's the important thing to understand. Now we're gonna take our time with this video, let it digest, because since it's the universe, there's a lot of stuff to go over. That's sort of the gist of that. Um, of course, I started talking about how like we're people on this ball flying through infinite space. And I'll try to save a bit of the craziness for the end of the video, but once you go down that route, it really gets pretty silly. Because then you start thinking about the fact that we're this ball spinning through infinite space, and then we're in this cluster called like a galaxy, this huge cluster of different solar systems and planets. Now, apparently, in the center of these galaxies, there's a black hole that some people theorize that maybe it leads to a completely new universe. So when you imagine all the galaxies in the universe that we know of, to imagine that all of them have a giant black hole in the center and that could potentially lead to a whole new universe, well then that's even sillier. So once again, if you're going through any sort of problems in life, when you think about that, you kind of realize how silly all that is. Unless it's a serious problem, and then you just throw all that away because it doesn't matter. Um, but I mean, as far as like simple, sort of interesting things to look at, let's just look at our own solar system because it's pretty interesting. Um, you know, uh, Mercury is an interesting planet. Um, it says here, even though Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, it is actually not the hottest. Mercury does not have an atmosphere, meaning that this planet is only hot in the daytime when it's directly facing the sun. So when it's facing the sun, it says it goes up to 425 degrees Celsius, which, if it's 425 degrees Celsius, you can't live on that planet. And then when it faces away from the sun, what's crazy that it actually drops down to minus 180 degrees Celsius. Now, what's interesting about that is that if you if you balance that just right, Mercury is actually a great planet to live on. It just depends. Basically, what I'm trying to say is it would work. A stationary house is not going to work. Ideally, on a planet like Mercury, is if you had a mobile home, it would actually be quite an easy place to live on. Because, so when you're directly facing the sun, it's way too hot. And when you're not facing the sun, it's way too cold. But if you live in a mobile home and you're constantly driving in between that point where the sun is pointing at Mercury and when it's not, if you kind of drive, if you just constantly drive somewhere in between those spots, it's probably perfect temperature. And in fact, you can probably just choose what temperature you want to experience depending on where in that in between area you're driving in, because you got to remember, here's Mercury, here's the sun, and if it's pointing right at it, then it's going to be too hot. And if it's pointing away from it, it's going to be too cold. But if you just kind of drive somewhere in between, it's probably perfect temperature. Now, that's something to think about, but obviously we can't do that yet because, first of all, the mobile homes for the average person, they're not very affordable. They range up to anywhere from like 30,000 to like 100,000 for those mobile homes. They're pretty expensive. Of course, even like transporting that to another planet would be difficult in itself, even if you can get a decent price for the mobile home. But let me see here. Here's another really interesting thing about the universe and space and all that. Apparently, when you cry in space, tears don't fall. So basically, if you're crying, you would just you your whole face would just drown in your tears. It says here that's where the term drowning in your own tears comes from, just from astronauts in space. Because you have to understand, they get lonely there. You know, we look at them as heroes and stuff, and they are, obviously, but they're also very sad because they're sitting there in space alone. And they spend the majority of their time just crying because it's just so lonely. We never really take that into account. We just think, yeah, they're heroes, but they're very sensitive. Um, Now, another really interesting thing is that Venus is the only planet that actually spins backwards, which is really crazy. Venus actually spins backwards from all the other planets, which is really crazy when you think about it. Um, I honestly feel like that's where all those sort of silly things come from that you hear about. You know, those the idea that, like women are from Venus, men are from Mars, all those silly ideas. I think they come from things like that. You never really think about it much, but I'm sure it probably has something to do with the idea that, you know, Venus spinning backwards, kind of like. But I'm sure most of you understand where I'm going with that. I just don't want to get too deep into that because it might sound like sexist or something. I don't want to make one of those videos where I'm just talking about like, oh, I get it. Venus spins backwards and women are complicated and strange and that's why they always have to do everything different and it's confusing. It's not one of those kind of videos. If you want to make one of those videos, you can, but I'm trying to like bring all of us to an equal ground. It's good to, for all of us to just be there together. So, some women could be from Mars, some women could be from Venus. It really all depends. We live in a modern time when girls can choose what planet they want to be from. Now, this is a really interesting fact. I learned about this preparing for this video, and it kind of blew my mind. Okay, so apparently, if two pieces of metal are in space, they will bond permanently. They'll just bond together and be stuck together permanently. Now here's what's crazy. Apparently the reason they bond and stick together. Now think about how crazy this sounds. Here's a piece of random metal, another piece of random metal, and they're in space and they'll just literally bond together and it'll just be one piece. Now apparently that happens because listen to this. It happens because the atoms of the individual pieces of metal have no way of knowing that they are different pieces of metal. So the lumps join together. And it says here this wouldn't happen on Earth because the air and water separating the pieces. So basically, if there's air and water in between the two pieces, they would never merge and be fused together. But since in space there's no air and water, they just fuse together, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Now now I wrote like a little idea about that, which is kind of, it says here, now I know we're evolving into a more advanced species and all the creepy stuff we used to do in the past are being outed now and we're trying to be better people, but technically speaking, oh yeah, right, I get what I was saying. I was trying to say with this information, technically speaking, if there's a girl that you really like, if you remove all the air and water in and or around her, you would just be magnetically bonded to her infinitely. And that's because the atoms in your individual bodies would have no way of knowing that you two are in fact two separate people because you remove the water and the air around you two, and then it just automatically fuses you two together. Now, keep in mind, this is a very aggressive way to sort of become a couple with somebody, especially if they're not aware of it, So generally what I'm trying to say is if you see a girl you like, please don't try to remove the air and then the moisture around her and fuse yourself with her, because that's, in a way, that's sort of pushy. And like I said, we're trying to evolve into a new sort of mindset where we're not forcing ourselves on somebody. So this is not a very evolved sort of idea, but technically speaking, it is possible to do this. But I would say be better than that and use it on at your own risk. I would not advise it because I think it's a little too pushy, but it's there as an option for somebody who wants to experiment. But I don't want to be blamed for that. Just keep in mind. I just told you it's possible, but I'm not saying for you to do it. Um, now, so we're talking about the universe and all these interesting facts, how you can, physically fuse yourself to a woman, but I can sit here, I can make this video 5 hours long and, give interesting facts about the universe because there's so many interesting facts about the universe that I can really make this video forever. Like I said at the beginning, it varies. It could be anywhere from 1 or 2 to like an infinite amount of time, depending on how much time you want to spend. But instead of doing that, because you guys could all research different interesting facts about the universe, how about we just get down to the real issue at hand? The ultimate issue. In existence and in life, we talk about the universe, there's only one real issue. Everything else is a joke, and it can just be all figured out. When you think about the universe and interesting facts and some people are very scientific, some people are not scientific, but the bottom line is, with some sort of scientific method and trial and error, eventually, if time is not an issue, we'll be able to figure out most of the mysteries of the universe and how things work, the mechanisms. That's what science is good for. What science does is that it figures out the mechanisms of how something works, and you put it down on paper, and it's like, it's something that helps us to understand how things work. But of course, with the universe, we always lead to the only ultimate question that no one could really ever answer. We have the universe and we have existence, but obviously the paradox of all that is, how is it even possible that we're here? How is existence possible? Now, this is the topic that kind of makes me laugh a lot, because I believe people's approach to this topic is completely skewed. We have this idea, you can talk to somebody and they'll have this idea that, like, well, we just don't know how existence is here and how it's possible because we just don't have the intelligence yet to understand it. And I'm sure there's probably some alien race out there that's much smarter than us that could understand it. Well, I think that's just a completely silly notion, because the idea of existence and how is it possible that we exist or that anything exists is not why we have trouble figuring this out is not a problem of intellect or intelligence or advancement. The reason we have trouble figuring this out is because it's something that no amount of intellect or intelligence can figure out, because it's nonsense. Okay? The idea of somebody being super intelligent is somebody who could understand things and make sense of them. But this is something that's complete nonsense. So it doesn't matter how smart you are. In fact, the more intelligent you are, probably the more senile such a thought would make you, right? Because if you're sort of like a more like happy-go-lucky, simple-minded person who just enjoys life and doesn't think about things too deeply, it's kind of like, I don't know, whatever, just everything is just here. Existence is just here. Who cares? Whatever. I'm just having fun. That's fine. But somebody who's truly beyond the average amount of intelligence, if they think about it too deeply, it could drive them completely senile, because it's absolute nonsense. And there will never be a time when you look at it from an intellectual point of view when it won't be nonsense. It doesn't matter how advanced. You can talk to the most advanced being in the world and it'll still be nonsense, because there's no answer from an intellectual point of view that could ever make sense, because it's nonsense. The idea of existence is absolute nonsense. It's because it's the ultimate of all paradoxes, right? Because when you subtract it back to the beginning, you have two variations. Either there was just something always here, which is complete nonsense, or something just magically appeared. Okay, so that's the problem that we have. Like, So that's why even the debate from religion to science, that debate is complete nonsense and silly too, because whether you look at it from a religious point of view or a scientific point of view, both points of views are complete nonsense. Because the scientific point of view is like, well, everything makes sense and everything here, but they kind of rely on one magical event to happen for all, because you have to have existence, you have to have something, right? A cause and effect. So basically, science sounds very rational and like smart. Well, these are very simple answers, you calculate them, but science relies on one magical event to happen. That's just an absolute fact. Okay? So basically science relies on one magical effect to have happened for everything else to happen after that. And then religion, of course, their magical effect is the idea that there's like some old man with a beard and he decided one day to like just like, create the universe. But they're both nonsense. If you look at them from an intellectual point of view. Because like I said, this is not an answer that the intellect could ever answer in a satisfying way. Assume you're somebody who's religious and believes in the idea of like a God. Imagine you talking to them one day. Dear God, how is it possible that we're all here? Like how are you here? How did you, like, if you created the universe, what created you? The only thing that God creature could ever say is, well, I don't know, I've always been here. I have no idea. He's never going to give you a satisfying answer. The best he could ever do is like, I don't know, I've just always been here, which is nonsense from an intellectual point of view. So imagine God, the all-knowing, and if you don't want to imagine God, the scientific point of view, imagine like the most intelligent being that's ever existed in this universe. You meet some advanced alien race that's billions of years more advanced than we are, and you ask them, how is existence possible? How are we here? Like how did existence come to existence? They're never going to give you an intellectual answer that makes sense because it's nonsense. By definition, existence is nonsense. Existence can't be anything other than nonsense because it's something that required no prior act for it to happen. There's no cause and effect. Everything works by cause and effect, so if it has no cause, it's nonsense. Oh, it just is. So basically what I'm trying to say is the universe and existence will never will never make sense or be a satisfying answer from an intellectual point of view. The only way you could ever really accept existence is if you just let go of the intellect and just sort of like just sort of get into your intuition and just sort of like meditate on it and then you just kind of have this idea of that, like, oh, it just is. And like you're so euphoric in your meditation and you're just like unconditionally just happy and roaming around that you're just satisfied. It just is. And you kind of throw your intellect out and you just like accept the fact that it just is and it always was. In that way, you can come to terms with it. But from an intellectual point of view, you're never going to come to terms with it because it's nonsense. It just is. It'll always be nonsense. Not only that, but the universe and existence in itself will never be something you could ever 100% know the reality of it, because you just can't. It doesn't matter. So let's say you're somebody who's scientific or is atheistic and doesn't believe in the afterlife or other dimension. So you just die and then you're gone. Okay, that's easy. But let's say you're somebody who believes that you die and then like your consciousness or soul goes to another dimension. This idea that we just die and then we go to another dimension and now we completely understand what's going on. That's also nonsense. You'll never understand what's going on. Because no matter what dimension you live in, you'll always be like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? How is any of this possible? So like if you're trying to like this idea that you die and you go to another dimension and you exist there, if you try to intellectualize it and like think about that from your intellect, you're still never going to get a satisfying answer, because like I said, even if you go to this other dimension and you close your eyes and you're like, oh, I want to talk to the source or God, dear God or source, how is any of this possible? How did you come here? The best answer they're ever going to give you is like, I don't know, I've just always been here. I'm source, I'm God, I've just always existed. That's it. That's as good of an answer as you're ever going to get. uh so this idea of, you die and you go to other dimensions and you experience other things, it just keeps going and going and going, and you just keep experiencing it. So it's going to be no different than being here. So being here on earth, you're born, and then all of a sudden you start living your life and you're like, what am I doing here? I don't know, I'm just existing. Why am I here? How am I here? I have no idea. But here I am, and you just kind of go about your day and you just live your life. Um, which really, the whole topic of the universe and existence, in a funny way, most of the stuff we do in life, it's just basically uh, keeping ourselves busy so we don't think about that thought. Because the thought is so insane, and you can never really fully intellectualize it in any sort of way that's satisfying. That people mostly spend most of their lives just keeping busy enough to preserve their own sanity. Um, Now that sounds really over dramatic, maybe sounds pessimistic or like, but it's not. It's just the way it is. I kind of look at it as like a funny thought. You can't look at it like in a pessimistic way. You don't have to, because it just is what it is. Sort of like existence. It just is what it is. And for a person to just sit there and just even try to contemplate that is such an overwhelming thought that most people will just rather just keep busy and not think about it. Um, Also, especially considering that you'll never have a satisfying answer. If you're lucky enough, the ones I consider the lucky ones are the lucky ones who maybe think about this thought one time in their life, and they laugh and they realize, oh, there's no intellectual answer that's going to satisfy me, so I'm just going to forget it and just live my life and be happy. Those are the lucky ones. But if you're cursed with the idea that like you can't get that idea out of your head, that's a rough one, because you know, the idea of waking up every day and thinking, how is any of this possible? What am I doing here? This is just so insane. That's a tough one. That's a tough one to get by. And So right now, I've talked 28 minutes exactly about the universe and existence. And like I said, this video could go on and on and on. And Like I said, I could list so many interesting facts about the universe, but it's not really important. Everyone can do their own research and find out, because the universe is filled with just millions upon millions of interesting facts, and the universe is just, it's beyond words, right? It's this idea that we live in this infinite space of just potential, infinite space of potential. Because that really is, when you think about what does the universe really represent, it represents infinite potential. It represents something bigger than even what it is. Because when you think about the universe, you look far ahead in places it expands farther than you could even see. So it's this idea that even though you're looking at trillions upon trillions of solar systems and galaxies and whatever else you're looking at, it's understanding how much there is, and yet still how much there is that you can't even see and that you can't even imagine. So the universe is really sort of like a physical metaphor of infinite potential, really. Um, and I would say my ultimate conclusion on the idea of the universe and what I can say about it is that I don't mean this in a pessimistic way or in a negative way, but the way I see it is, you exist. You're never going to know exactly how it's possible to exist, how anything is possible to exist. It just is. Existence is just here. I know it seems like nonsense, and it is absolute nonsense. It can never be anything other than absolute nonsense because it's so ridiculous from an intellectual point of view. You can let all of that go and just be in the moment and just accept it that it just is. You can do that, and that's probably the best approach because it's nothing the intellect is ever going to figure out. Because it's like back towards science if you're more scientifically minded, because I know I talked a lot about dimensions and afterlife, but to bring it down back to earth from a scientific point of view, science is a beautiful thing. And the thing about science is that everything within existence, science most likely within time will figure out the mechanisms of how it all works, all these mysteries. But existence itself, I'm sorry, science, there's nothing you can do about that. And I've heard every sort of scientific theory on it. Well, it's, quantum fluctuations happened and that just spurred on this. Yeah, where did those quantum fluctuations come from? From magic? It doesn't matter what sort of scientific answer you try to give to it. It'll always be nonsense. It just will. Plain and simple. It doesn't matter what advancements we'll get. The actual notion of existence at the deepest level will always be complete nonsense from a rational scientific point of view. It just will. Now that might sound like, oh, why you seem so confident about that? It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Because by definition, existence is just absolute nonsense. It's just the way it is. And if you can somehow get past that and have an enjoyable, fun life, I urge you to do that, because it's a problem that you'll probably never have a satisfying answer to from an intellectual point of view. So this video will probably get you nowhere to feeling better about the universe. But I decided to make it anyways, just to sort of get my thoughts out there, because like I said, at the end of the day, we live our lives and we do all these things, but when you're sitting around with somebody, the only thing you ever really truly talk about, if you get somewhere deep, is this. You hang out with somebody and you have a little, small talk, you talk about things at work, you talk about what you're doing. But if you ever just let that all go and you're just looking at each other, you want to just look at the other person and just be like, hey, how are we here? How is any of this possible? Isn't this crazy? Like, do you ever just like wake up and just think, how am I even here? How is anything here? And I assume every single human being must have thought about it at least once in their life. And like I said, if you're one of the lucky ones, you thought about it once, you realize that you're never going to get a satisfying answer, and you just let go of it. Because this video is 33 minutes long now, and I can just keep rambling about this for another 5 million hours, and it'll never advance anymore. If I let this video go and I lived for 5 billion more years, in 5 billion years from now, I will not have any more of a satisfying answer to this. Not from an intellectual point of view anyways. So that means I should just stop the video, because yeah, the satisfying answer to existence is not coming anytime soon, and probably never. I really hope this video didn't seem too pessimistic or negative, because it's really not. It's almost like the idea of like, we as conscious beings, as people, we have to just laugh at it. We have to have enough humility to laugh at it. Because I sometimes laugh because I'll see like a really smart scientist talking about this, and they're like, well, we just don't have the answer now for that, but soon we'll build this machine that will tell. What sort of satisfying answer could you possibly get to existence? Like I said, if you scale it back enough, there's only two possible scenarios, and they're both nonsense. Either something has always been here, or something just kind of magically popped into existence. That's it. There is no third option. There is no fourth option. That's it. It's just those two options. Either something was always here, which from a rational intellectual point of view is absolute nonsense, or something magically came, popped into existence. That's it. That's all you have. Those are the only two answers you have to work with, and they're both nonsense. Now you're probably thinking, oh, how do you know that? Maybe there's a third option. Okay, well, you can leave a comment and talk about that third option. but so yes, have enough humility to understand that it just is. We're here, and then try to let go of that as much as you can so you can have an enjoyable life. Because if you get too wrapped up in that thought, then you'll just be too consumed by it, and you won't even have time to let go and enjoy the moments of your life. Because no matter what you're going through, no matter what moment you're experiencing, you're just like, how is this even possible? How am I here? And you just never get to enjoy any of it. So that's my only hope for people, that they can let go of that thought as much as they can, and so to have a happy, enjoyable life, because that's all you can really do. And like I said, and even if you were to die and go to another dimension, you're gonna that whole thing is never gonna resolve, because you die, what, you go to another dimension, oh, so now I'm here. How am I here? What is this dimension all about? How does this dimension exist? How is this possible? It just goes on and on, right? So all we can really do is just accept the fact that we exist. It's nonsense. It's completely just beyond any sort of intellectual thing you can make sense of, and you have to let go of it as much as you can and just try to enjoy the moments that you exist. And that's all we can really do. And that's my conclusion on the universe / existence. Like I said, please don't take this video as being negative or pessimistic. I'm just trying to be honest with myself, and I've enough humility to understand that I'll probably never get a satisfying answer to that on an intellectual level for all of my eternity, however long I'll live, even if I lived forever. And you have to be just sort of almost like fine with that and just let go to the best of your abilities, and that's all we can really do. And what I was saying before about using aspects of the fact that we're on this ball floating around through infinity, you can really use that at some points if you find that you're taking things in life a little bit too seriously, like small little things that are not really that important, because it will give you a bit of perspective of okay, come on, this is already existence, and everything around is already so ridiculous enough. Let's just be a little bit more lighthearted and enjoy little things in life, and let's not let every little thing get us down or annoy us, because all of this that we're experiencing is completely crazy. We just live, we exist. We're on this ball floating around through infinite space, and we get lost in little things sometimes, oh, my phone's not working right, or the update to slow down my phone, and oh, this and that. Yes, these are, big scale, not that important. I think, like I said, that's as much as I can say right now. I rambled on much too long. But like I said, when you have these review channels, at one point, you kind of have to review the universe. It's kind of what else is bigger than that to review, right? Of course, these universe reviews, you never really come out with it with any sort of satisfying answer, because you can't, but you do the best you can to express yourself, and that's what I try to do. So, in conclusion, I hope you guys could let go of all of that and enjoy your lives and have fun, because that's all we can do. And I will leave it at that. And you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.